Perfect. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
It's spring. Welcome. Come on in, there's seats over there.
Standing room only, huh?
No, there's more seats over there.
Buddy, let me hold that
No.
for you.
All right, we're going to get started. I'm Bonnie Milne Gardner.
Rod Bosser.
Ann Baxter.
And we're three of the members from the Landscape Committee that are making presentations to you today about the 3 agenda items that we have up there. Come on in, there's seats over on that side. The first thing I wanted to do was make sure that you were all aware of the members of the committee. We have a pretty healthy committee. And so if you're on the landscape committee or one of our liaisons, I'd like you to stand up, please. So those are our fellow committee members, and some of those members have been on the committee for decades, and some of them are brand new like me. The Landscape Committee wanted to have this opportunity to share with you what our activities have been recently. When the board had a town hall meeting back in November, December, whenever that was, we made the announcement that we were going to put all alteration requests on pause until the worst of the storm debris was cleared and figured out. Well, the committee's decided we've reached that moment when enough of the major storm clearing has occurred that we can begin to look seriously at planting. And I know everybody's chomping at the bit to do it. I am. There's still a lot of work to be done, as you know, with stump removal and other things. But now that all of the, most of, no, I should not say that, many of the timber that was cut has been taken off the property, and we have now turf that needs attention, that was underneath it for months, et cetera, et cetera. We can begin to work on that. One of the most important things that we want to accomplish in this next hour is we are eager to empower you with all the tools you need to get the work done that you'd like to get done, like we all would, on the property. So towards that end, we've done some work, and we're continuing to do work to reach those goals of restoring our beautiful property that we have here. First thing we're going to do is, I should say, as you know, these are the 3 things we're going to talk about today. We're going to begin with how to submit a landscape request, and then we're going to follow up with the master plan and the revised guidelines that are in process. If you have questions about the storm clearance work, we'll save that towards the end. The board is managing all of the storm clearance work. The landscape committee is not involved directly in that. So we don't have a lot of that information probably that you might be curious about, and for most of that I'm going to direct you to the board. But we are beginning to do something, the Landscape Committee is, towards the restoration of the property, and we'll share that with you at the end as well. All right? So, to begin, we have a handout. Turn it on. All right.
That's a typical man. Typical man.
I think I'm taking away his admin privileges tonight, though.
Are there supposed to be 3 extra parts?
Where's the screw go?
There will be a quiz. It's the same thing. All right.
I'm going to tackle this first item on the agenda, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues to tackle the other items on the agenda. First of all, I have to give credit where credit is due. I'm just the spokesperson. This format is the brilliant brainchild of the Building Maintenance Committee, and who else helped?
Stan. Yeah.
The Technology Committee and the Building Maintenance Committee. And they came up with this step-by-step how to submit, in their case, a building maintenance request. And we saw this and thought it was a great template to use, so Stan and Barney worked to use it for our purposes. So it's the step-by-step, and as you can see, there's 2 ways that you can submit a landscape request, electronically and paper submission. We prefer you use the electronic for a number of reasons, and you can use either your cell phone or your computer. It saves time. We get to your request sooner, and we can respond to it sooner. So it's just the preferable way. But you can also get a paper copy from the box in the gazebo, either of the maintenance request or the alteration request, and fill it out and put it back in the box there, and then our committee members will take it and scan it and put it digitally into it. So those are the 2 ways. And that's the way to do it on your cell phone, which I've never done. I always do it from the computer. But this is laid out in a really clear step-by-step. Both of them are, the laptop or the... And what we liked about this was when you open up the page in condo control, they put in what it looks like. And so you can see exactly, it's got the language, but also the visual language as well. And you just follow, what's the subject, you put a description of what you want, like trim the bushes by my back door or whatever. And if you have pictures, you can attach them, upload them, and then just send it. Send it. Just hit the send at the bottom of the electronic page. And anybody on the tech, if this is something that's not easy for you to do, anybody on the technology committee will be happy to work with you on it and show you how to do it the first time. And walk you through it. So.
May I interrupt?
What's up?
There's a guy in a big truck down at the gate that wants to come through to remove something near 72 Stony Ridge.
Let me talk with you about this, Ann. Excuse me, folks, sure. There's a big truck where?
Okay, and we thought it was really important. This will be on the website, on condo control rather, and it will be accessible there. But we also thought it was important to hand you a copy to take home with you today, and also so that you wouldn't have to try to look at it on the screen, but you could look at it here. And give you this handout, as I said before, to empower you to get the work done that you'd like to get done this spring. All right, yes?
Just following on, what is the tracking process? So people who submitted the request know at what stage, yes, it's been looked at, it's in review. I mean, just
Good question.
setting the
Absolutely, yes. This is a maintenance request, can be immediately seen by the two co-chairs, Rod and myself, as well as Dan Scott, who manages the Second Nature Landscape Company. And so we can discuss it internally, digitally, and we can also communicate with the person who's made the request. You will get an immediate response that it's been received, just verified. And sometimes we might have a follow-up question, and we might put it on there. You'll get an email with that. So we might give you a call. Who knows? If it's an alteration request, it's probably going to come to the committee because we have a system that we use on the committee with how we handle alteration requests. And one of the reasons we are putting this process and working with some new guidelines is we want to try to get the requests done in a timely manner as much as possible. And Rod and I started doing this back in, July, June, and it seems to be working really well. And then, of course, the hurricane hit, so it got interrupted a little bit. But we're pretty confident that that system of communication is going to work. Plus, we have a record of it. And all alteration requests have to have in writing permission to do whatever you've done, and that's what this provides. You'll get a copy of that. We'll have a copy of it. It's all in writing, and you'll know exactly what has been approved, or what part of it.
How about timeline for execution of the project?
That depends on the project. It can, and we have some maintenance requests that are urgent. We've discovered a sinkhole in our front yard kind of thing. And those we deal with much more quickly, obviously. And the ones that aren't quite as urgent, we can handle together. Yeah.
Is it possible to see prior approved requests in order to have a template for your own requests?
Well, the thing is, every single one is so unique. The guidelines give a lot of information about what to include in your request and how to write it up. You know what? The committee's meeting tomorrow. We're having our monthly meeting tomorrow. Let's talk about that. What do you think, committee members? Let's talk about that. Okay.
Seems like there'd be less going back and forth to you all, with changes, and if you can see something that's already been approved.
Well, the instructions are also on the, in the handbook, but also online. I mean, on the website too. Condo control, not the website, condo control, because the handbook is on our website, but condo control has, you know, how to submit and other information. So, but I think that the short answer is, it's something we're gonna need to think about, because truthfully, every alteration request is so different. Now, one thing I did want to say up front is, a lot of people are a little confused about annuals. You can plant any annuals in the mulched area you want without, you do not have to submit an alteration request for that. And that's one of the things we're adding to the revised guidelines, is a whole list of, here's things you do not need an alteration request for. But if you want to plant, you know, pansies or stuff like that, Chris.
What if you're planting just perennials? Not for any
Daylilies,
Perennials, yeah.
yeah, right,
request?
yeah. Well, not anything invasive, and that's again on the guidelines. No invasive, no English ivy, and that's on the
But
guidelines.
bamboo is okay, right?
I have a question, a technical question on condo control. Does someone have to do something to make sure they get the email notification?
That's constant. I mean, that's,
That happens
building
automatically?
maintenance requests depend on that. I mean, the machinery of the whole community depends on that working properly.
It's automatic, yeah.
That's one of the beauties of it too, is if you as a resident submit a request,
Then it's gonna.
you don't have to tell it your name or your unit number,
I know, I mean,
and it tracks your, you know, so then any replies from the committee go straight to you, and they don't have to remember which email address are we talking to or any of that.
it had been so long since I set mine up.
Point of order, if you're recording this, do you have a mic to pass around so that people can hear the questions, or would you repeat the questions? It's not being recorded.
Okay, the recording is using the microphone that's on the table there, so if they
I'll
can
be
hear
happy
your
to.
question at the table, it should be on the recording.
And I'll be happy to repeat the questions,
Thank you.
Jane. Yeah, or we'll be happy to repeat the questions. And Rod just wanted me to remind folks that these landscape alteration requests are for landscaping, not road repair or building issues, those are building maintenance matters.
I will say about condo control, that's been one real advantage of using condo control after Helene, because a whole lot of people have reported things that they don't know what category it is. It's just, there's something going on over here that someone needs to look at. And they file it as a building maintenance request, and we can easily convert it to lighting or whatever,
True,
you know,
true.
whichever
And-
department it needs to go to.
And vice versa, you know,
Correct.
we've gotten some that we shifted over to the
And some
appropriate
overlap.
committee, yeah.
There are,
Yeah.
you know, someone putting in a generator that then triggers landscaping having to be moved or
Right,
something.
Right. Okay, we're gonna move on to our, to one of our other agenda items now, the, guidelines. Yeah, speaking of the guidelines, Ann is our guideline guru.
guidelines are a work in progress. And for everybody who is here, the guidelines are on condo control in the handbook. And there are some of us who have been here long enough that we have paper copies. So, they are, they're there for everybody to see. And to answer somebody's question about, things that can be put, annuals that can be put in your yard, there are a few things like hollyhocks, et cetera, that are listed in the guidelines that are not, appropriate.
Sunflowers?
Sunflowers, yes. So, just take a look at the guidelines and, you'll see what is there. The guidelines are a work in progress, and I think the important thing to know right now is that the guidelines as they're written stand. So there have been no changes in the guidelines to this point. And there are, the reasons for that are, number one, it's a work in progress. And we have, Bonnie and Murad will mention it in a minute, we have hired a landscape architect, and there may be many recommendations that come from that will cause us to want to change the guidelines. The cleanup, there may be things that result from that will cause us to want to change the guidelines. And then budget. And those are issues that are all out there right now. And so as we get more information from those three areas, we will continue to update them. But I think the important thing to remember is what is in the guidelines now holds for doing work in the mulched area around your apartments, residents. Yes.
Hey, Barney?
Barney.
Barney?
Barney, the question for you.
Would you be able to put up on the screen condo control and show us where we find landscape guidelines?
Yes, actually, yeah, after this, anyone who wants to stay after, I can have a session up on the screen with anybody's phone, or anyone wants any help, or, yeah, demonstration of anything.
That's great, a demo when we're done, all right.
Thank you.
And freedom for people who don't want the demo to leave.
And anybody who has questions, some of them we may not be able to answer right now, but we will continue to work.
You should tell them who's working on the guidelines.
Okay, the guidelines committee, Mary Ann Case, Patty Fertel, Bonnie, and myself are the people who are working on that. Thank you, Bonnie.
Yep.
And one of the things that we're working on in the guidelines is taking the 7 pages that are current guidelines, and we're condensing them and organizing them to make them a little easier to read and accessible. But as Ann said, the content is pretty much going to be the same, the ideas in it. There will be a few tweaks, as you said, because of things we're considering right now.
Questions?
Kathy? I'm sorry, because I missed a good chunk here, but what I was wondering is the master plan posted someplace where we can look at it? Is there an actual drawing or anything?
Yeah, we'll get there in a minute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's coming up,
Okay,
right,
good.
yeah.
I didn't miss that.
No, that's fine, Kathy. She asked about the master plan. Are there any other questions about the guidelines? And anybody on the committee would be happy to talk to you about some of them too. All right, then let's move on to the master plan.
Well, Thank you, Kathy, for that nice lead-in. I'll pay you afterwards. Before we talk about the master plan, let's go back and talk about the landscape architect. The board has retained Hutch Kearns as the Beaver Dam landscape architect. There were probably 10 landscape architects that were contacted here in the Asheville area. All but 3 turned us down for one reason or another. Most of them said they were just too busy to take on additional work. I don't know why they're busy. But I think we were fortunate that having interviewed 3, it was unanimous that we liked Hutch Kearns. Hutch Kearns' offices are down by Pack Square. He's been in the business for over 20 years here in Asheville. His mother, for a few years, actually lived here at Beaver Dam, so he was familiar with the property. And we're hoping that within the next 2 months, we will have a master plan. Ann and Bonnie and I met with him to talk about our priorities and what questions he may have as he starts to gather his information. We talked about sustainability, that we wanted low maintenance, native plantings, we wanted to avoid invasives, wanted to control erosion, we want to pay attention to the type of trees and the size of trees and where they're planted so that they're appropriate for the surrounding area, so we don't end up, with the giant oaks in between 2 units that becomes problematic, probably not in our lifetimes, but in the next generation of Beaver Dam residents' lifetimes. And of course, what we can do to improve the beautification of not just the turf and the grounds, but the ponds and the streams. He was happy to hear all that. He was agreeable. There was no heartburn with any of it. He talked about the topography, the erosion, the slopes, the soil conditions, water conditions, the climate, pointing out the real difference in elevation between down on Clubside and up at the top of Beaver Dam. So we're hoping that he understands our priorities as he begins his work, and that we will have a comprehensive plan for us to review after he does his site visit. You may see him around here checking things out, and we're hoping that we will have a community meeting at a later date to discuss what he envisions as a rebuild and a reimagining of Beaver Dam. In the meantime, while you're doing your alteration request, they may be put on hold or held up because we want to make sure that it's integrated with the master plan, the blueprint that we would use going forward. That blueprint, of course, is always flexible and subject to change, but we want to have things integrated rather than a real Wild West where the warm weather comes and everyone's out planting whatever they want, wherever they want, however they want. Our goal is to avoid that. Questions? Dennis?
Does Kern have a deadline for getting their report to us?
He said it'd be 6 to 8 weeks.
We started the process with gathering all of the records, plans, drawings that have been done over the years from engineering companies, from other landscape architects. He brought in a huge color copy of an aerial view showing every house, every large tree, and we were like, that tree's not there anymore, that tree's not there. that aerial view was done, I don't know, by the state or the county
The Forestry Service
Ah.
in the county.
in 2023. So it's fairly recent, but it's pre-storm. The plan is, after he finishes his site visit, and, you know, now that he has all of that data, plus the list of priorities that the whole committee came up with, those list of priorities. We had a long brainstorming session and we winnowed it down and handed those to him. But after that visit, he's gonna come up with a preliminary plan, as Rod said, and that preliminary plan will be brought back to the committee and to the community for feedback. And he wants feedback, and he'll be specific about what kinds of things he wants to hear about. Because we've told him we want to maintain a lot of the beauty that we have around here, and that our organization has been shepherding for decades, but we also want to take advantage of this unique moment in time when so much of our property has been cleared and destroyed, to make sure we go forward intentionally with some advice from a professional. So yes, Kathy, the community will see the preliminary plan and have the opportunity to give feedback.
Was privacy in the list of priorities?
Yes.
Was privacy in the list of priorities was the question, and Rod's answer was,
Yes.
Yeah. And a second question, will we know what parts of the replanting will be assumed in terms of the cost by the committee, and what would be assumed by the residents?
Who's going to pay for it is Bill's question. You, us, whoever. That's an excellent question. The Landscape Committee at this moment in time really doesn't have a budget large enough to do much than minimal. It was based on a normal year, last year. It wasn't based on after the storm. And I think what's going to happen is people will volunteer to fast track the replantings around their unit. And if that's approved and in line with the master plan, it'll be green lighted. Others may wait for the community to do something in their particular area, and that may take longer because it's clear that in terms of our budget, it will be a multi-year process. Everything will not be planted in 1 year.
Is the board looking at possibilities, if there's any money left over from the cleanup, to filter it into replanting?
I will direct that question to the board. We have not been given that information.
But we expect to have that conversation with the board.
Is there a capability to ask this consulting company to take a look at our individual units as well after the master plan?
Will the landscape architect be willing to take a look at individual units? Part of the master plan does involve looking at the individual units and providing a lot of recommendations as to what should be planted and where they should be planted and when they should be planted. If you want more than that, I'm sure that can be arranged.
Okay.
Yeah,
But it's very general. I mean, the company's going to provide a plant palette.
Okay.
It will not be, you should plant this next to your front door.
Right.
No, most of most of the master plan specifics, the diagrammatics, will deal with the common areas, the common landscaped areas.
Okay.
He's not going to be doing much with the natural areas.
Okay.
Tom?
Within the last year, there was a survey that was done that incorporated, I think, by way of the landscape committee, a sum of money for invasives. This was pre-storm. I guess my question is, what is the health of our invasives as we know it today? I mean, did the storm have any effect upon that?
It was interesting, I had asked that question.
Repeat the question.
Oh, what's the status of invasives in our community right now? And I asked that of the landscape architect. And the reason I asked it was Bonnie and I had gone to a meeting with all kinds of landscape and forestry people back in January, and it was talked about there too. And the question is, it's an unknown, but when spring comes, they said the fact that the tree canopy has been decimated in this area, that we will have a green bloom, but you won't know what it is until it comes up. But based on our past history with the invasives here, I think we still have a healthy selection of them.
I was also told by Eco-Forester that, with the hurricane, and that tends to bring, when the ground's been disrupted, more invasives up.
Right. Yes. Catherine?
You may have already alluded to this when you talked about the different elevations, but will they be looking at the potential for landslides or how to prevent landslides? Does this
Yes.
fit in there?
That's one of the priorities.
Okay.
Is preventing erosion.
Yvonne?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the natural areas, and I was wondering if you, the landscape committee, were giving Mr. Kearns an idea that we could really maybe be more, just in a better situation if we had more natural areas, so that the mowers wouldn't have to mow twice or three times, in a 2-week period. You know what I mean? So that we have more natural.
A lot of people do.
Yeah, that's something that, can be discussed. Along those lines, it was also suggested that if we took some of that turf area and made it more into wildflower meadows or into, azaleas and rhododendron, it would be less maintenance.
And both,
Sustainability is one of the 6 priorities, and that is one of the subcategories of it. And our committee, at least in the year plus that I've been on it, we spend a lot of time talking about ways to reduce the amount of maintenance and cost of maintaining it, but also maintaining, the uniformity and the beauty.
How will they deal with the invasive stuff when they find it?
We haven't figured that out yet. It takes money to deal with the invasives. And we don't have that money in our budget. Again, that's a question as to how much the board wants to dedicate and what funds are available.
I noticed there are some companies in Asheville now that specialize in getting rid of invasives on people's property, so we may need to hire some of those people, possibly if they're, have the insurance that we need.
there was a question here.
Rod, you mentioned that there'll be several years on which this will be unrolled once we have this plan and consensus around it. That would indicate to me that what we're gonna see in 6 weeks or so, we should expect to be kind of what we call a high-level plan then, concept plan?
I would say it'd be high level, but more high intermediate. I don't think it's not gonna be that aerial view kind of, if you're talking that high level.
No, I didn't mean high level, I mean concept, high level.
Yeah,
That's what I mean.
yeah.
Yeah.
Broad.
To follow up on Bill's question, I'm hoping that this plan will not just be, this is what we're going for, period, but rather say, in a phase, that they will help us identify phases in which to best implement the plan. Is this
Yes.
is
Yep.
good?
Yes.
Excellent.
Stan,
Yeah.
Yeah.
he's done this with a lot of other, properties, churches and other, institutions, and I'll quote him, remember this, Ann? He said he likes it to be a living document that the community uses year after year after year, not something they put on a shelf and never look at again. So that's, I think, the way he operates.
Janine?
What's going to be done about the trees in the forests above 88?
When we're done talking about the master plan, which doesn't deal with the forests, Jeannie Menifee's gonna tell you all about that. The forests, because we've been working to investigate those areas too.
Tom?
Good chance we'll wanna do some of our own planting, especially along our front walk. Will the master plan maybe have some sort of a plant list so that we
Yes.
know what to put?
Yeah.
Yes.
That would be very helpful.
You might want to repeat the question for the
Once again, it was
Yeah,
asked,
plant list.
will the master plan have a plant list on it for recommendations for what to plant? And yes, the plant palette is one of the deliverables that his proposal has.
Back to the invasives, Dan was very successful in getting rid of some stuff on our hill. And it took time, but he did it with just, the leaves. He just kept piling leaves.
Mulching. Yeah, Dan's been really good about identifying areas, and he mentions it to our committee from time to time, and requests permission to deal with it.
We put cardboard down, and then, this was in a wooded area, well, it was wooded, and put cardboard down, and then he just kept piling leaves on top, and now it's gone.
Yeah, the invasives all have to be treated differently.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
an easy way. Last year, we hired a service to come in to deal with the trees of heaven.
Oh,
And each one of those, after it's cut, has to be hand-touched with a chemical.
Yeah.
Then they had to come back and do it again. So that's labor-intensive and not at all cheap.
Right.
Okay, any other?
We got two of them.
My name's Kathy. You talked about 6 categories and sustainability was one of them. What were the other 5?
There's sustainability, there's drainage, fire resistance, beautification, tree management, erosion,
Privacy.
Jane.
So question, one of the things you mentioned when you gave the list earlier was beautification to include ponds and streams. Does he have a particular expertise or interest in doing some things with our ponds or along the streams?
He's gonna make recommendations.
Okay, so he is gonna cover that. Thank you.
Gail?
Did you talk to him about what kind of budget we would have to do all of this?
I think he knows from our negotiations just with him on what we're gonna pay him. Plus, as I said, his mother lived here for a few years, so he's familiar with our situation.
But that subject did come up in our conversation with him. We said, this is not the sky's the limit kind of community.
And he also understands that he will not be the one doing the plantings. We're gonna use Dan and our people to do it. You know, it's different than if you're putting in a new housing development and the landscape architect designs it all and then plants everything. This is a different animal. Bill?
Yeah, stream management is a subject I'm sure we'll be dealing with in the future, right? I mean, we've got a ripped out bed around it right now, and control of that in the future could be highly obviously influenced by the plantings we choose, including the ability to provide some backups for overflow areas to lead the water away from hard structures and things like that. Is that part of his?
Well, once again, I'm gonna direct you to the board, because they've hired an engineering company that is looking, or did look, and is providing the board with a report on redoing the hardscaping, the rocks, and controlling where the flow of water goes and everything. But I don't know anything more about it, so I'd have to direct you to the board for the rest of that information.
I'm just raising the idea that there's an overlap between those two.
Oh, we know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jackie is coming to our landscape committee meeting tomorrow to answer some of these questions that we have, and we will be happy to reiterate the ones you've brought up today.
I was just wondering if the architect mentioned using swales as a way to slow down water in areas that are currently denuded.
We mentioned that to him, and we'll have to see what he comes back with. Tom?
Dan has been mentioned a few times. I don't know who Dan is or what our
Dan Scott.
with him should be as individual residents. Should we be in contact with him or
When you submit a landscape
Wait,
maintenance
wait,
request, it goes straight to him.
Dan Scott owns Second Nature Landscape, which is our landscape consulting and contractor. Before he owned the company, he worked for the previous owner, and he's been on the property, must be close to 20 years now. You see them around the property working. When you put in a landscape request, as Bonnie mentioned earlier, it comes to Dan, Bonnie, and I. About 75% of those requests, Dan can deal with in short order. The more complicated ones require some conversation. At the same time, anyone who lives here can hire Dan on a private basis or his crew to do plantings or removals once your alteration request is approved. Or you can hire someone else to do it. Jane?
Which raises the issue of when you have something done that's done by Dan, his insurance covers that. When you put in an alteration request to be done, if you hire Dan, that insurance will also cover that. If you hire a different contractor, then we need to know who that contractor is, the same as we need to know who other contractors working in and around your unit are. So certificates of insurance still apply.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Repeat that, Jane, for the recording, that, as you know, our insurance coverage has become, what's the right word? A little more proactive on work that's done around here. And if you do hire an outside contractor other than Dan, they must have the appropriate insurance before any work begins. And just because you used them last year or 2 years ago That COI has expired. COIs are
Certificate of insurance.
certificates of insurance.
Very good.
Are
I've worked with Jane.
must be renewed annually. And so that's why we ask for a current COI. Did I say that right, Jan?
You did. I thought they had to do it every 6 months. Is that not right?
Bruce?
How often, was the question, does the COI have to be
COIs
renewed?
generally last about 6 months.
Yeah.
Okay, 6 months.
That's not the issue. The issue is it enforced when they're doing the work?
Exactly.
That's right.
You need an approved COI before the work can begin.
And it has to be submitted to us, and we have to approve it. It can't be, you or that company.
And the COI goes to the insurance committee.
Correct.
And the certificate holder should be Beaver Dam Run Condominium Association, 1 Stony Ridge, Asheville, Ohio, or Asheville, North Carolina. Asheville, North Carolina. You can tell where I came from. 28804.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a comment. I think we all recognize that we're at a moment where we can influence the beauty of this property over the next 20 years. And so I just wanted to express appreciation for all that the landscape committee is doing. That you're the ones guiding us all, and personally I think it's just going to be beautiful. What we're going to wind up planting over the next several years as we see new trees budding and all this kind of stuff. Really appreciate all the work that you're doing.
Yes.
Thank you.
I want to reiterate all of those members of the landscape committee. We've had some difficult conversations in the last few months, haven't we? Okay, that's the end of our 3 agenda items. I did want to update you a little bit on what we're involved with the storm cleanup, but for the rest of it, as I said, we're going to have to direct you to the board who's managing the bulk of that. As many of you know, Dan Scott and his company, Second Nature, have been doing above and beyond their contract work, their routine contract work, by going around and picking up all the small debris after the big tree companies and Chris Todd and all of their equipment have been cutting trees and everything. And they've just been doing that during their regular time here. So that's, as Dan said, they've done that because they want to help out. But they've been able to maintain all their regular duties with, clearing the leaves and reseeding and fertilizing and pruning and all of the things that they're supposed to be doing in a seasonal manner. The other thing that Dan Scott and Second Nature are beginning to tackle, and this is something that the committee authorized, and Dan always has to get authorization from the committee for the work that he does, the materials that he buys, expenses, that sort of thing. And I mentioned the turf restoration earlier, and now that those areas that are where the grass has been killed are exposed, Dan has bought a commercial grade tiller to help tackle those areas, and extra straw and seed and whatever it's going to take to get that going. Some of the areas he will be able to do this spring, but some of them, especially when root balls are taken out and everything, are going to have to wait till next fall, because those are the 2 times that you see. You can't do it in the middle of summer. It's a waste of money and materials. So that work, the board has approved, is going to be done overtime, because they can't do that and their routine duties at the same time. And of course, that amount of turf restoration is above and beyond what he would normally see in a year of turf restoration. So that's the whole reason he's not here today. We were hoping he would be with us today, but he had to go pick up the tiller down in Hendersonville. He got the call, I don't know, just after lunch that it was ready, so he went to get that. So you'll see the crews working overtime on some of those areas this spring, but some of the areas we might rethink instead of grass, but those are conversations we're going to be having on a weekly basis, probably with Dan. Yeah.
Can I make a brief statement on behalf of the board?
Debbie, yeah. I couldn't see, the silhouette behind you was.
So, since I seem to be the only board member here,
Thank you.
I'm going to do my best to tell you that I don't know how we're going to do all of this. I know that Jackie's been working very hard with our recovery. A number of us would like to see that recovery being transferred back to the committees that make the decision about how those recovery things are happening. We're having a board meeting tomorrow, and I will learn more at that time from Jackie, and I assume the landscaping will all also. But this is not gonna happen in 1 year. It's not gonna happen in 2 years. And what we've got to weigh is what our costs are gonna be and what we're able to do. And it's not gonna be an easy decision. So I get that everybody wants everything to look beautiful again, but I get that nobody wants to have our assessment, another assessment or any dues raised.
Do you have a priority list, like retaining walls, is that a priority?
I'm sure that Jackie does. I'm not aware of how those are all listed. But I have been asked this before, if our assessment is gonna make it. We're gonna use that assessment the best that we can. I think that we're being very good stewards of the money that we have. A number of people have been frustrated that we've had so much debris left and we're only getting some of it cleaned now. That's because we were waiting for the Army Corps of Engineers to do it at no additional cost to us. So we're trying to preserve the funds as best we can and make them last the longest. But it's just not gonna happen overnight. So what I say is be patient with us, keep coming to us with your questions and your concerns, but also know that we don't have a lot of special power and special knowledge. We're gathering, this never had a hurricane here before that we had to deal with. So we're doing the best we can, but I appreciate questions and comments, and I will relay anything that is asked of me to the board.
Thank you, Debbie, that was really helpful. And thank you for being here. Before we get into the demo that Barney's gonna do, or if someone wants to talk with Debbie, I did wanna report one last activity that the Landscape Committee's been working on, and that is because of this forestry event that we went to in early January, we became convinced that there was one nonprofit organization, actually they were sponsoring the event, weren't they, that would be most helpful to us. And they talked about coming out to look at our property and give us recommendations. And our Tall Trees Committee, spearheaded by Jeannie Menifee, made contact with them, and boy, were they busy, right, Jeannie? Come up here and tell them what your process was, and the good news you got, and what we hope to get from
it's taken me quite a while to hear back from them. And I finally got up with the executive director. And he is sending out a forester next Thursday morning. And, Rod and Jane, and I invited, Jackie, I haven't heard back from her, to look at it with him.
Who is? Eco foresters.
I'm sorry, I thought she made it clear. Eco Foresters, and they're a nonprofit organization. And they also are interested in going over invasive plants with us. It seems to be the theme. And they also have a crew that will work on them for a price, but I didn't go there with him. But anyway, he will look at our forest, our woods, and give us recommendations. He also mentioned on the last email that he is gonna bring a map that they're doing of Beaver Dam Run. That's
It's
interesting.
the aerial, it's probably the
Yeah.
same,
Yeah.
yeah.
But anyway.
Jeannie, how much of the property beyond 88 do we own? I mean,
That's a doggone good question. I can't find out the answer.
I mean, all those downed trees up there.
Yeah, we own right to the top. There was a survey done
To the
recently.
ridge.
Yeah.
Interesting. Can we build a really tall fence?
I know one of the other things that they talked about that the foresters can help us with are, fire prevention and control.
Absolutely.
Erosion, you know, all of these things that we're concerned about. These guys are pros, not only that, they know the region. They know these plants,
Yes.
they know these mountains, they know these woods.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons Rod and I were so impressed with their presentation and what they talked about. And Jeannie's been great being persevering with them because they're so busy. Everybody wants them right now. Yeah, we got a question back there.
Yeah, it's about the fire.
The fire.
Because right now it looks like we have a lot of kindling.
Yes.
Exactly.
On the park, and I had this big tree that just kind of fell
Right.
this far from my house.
I'm
And
very
it's
aware of
dead.
that, yeah.
And so, I would be willing to pay for myself to get a contractor to remove it. But in the meantime, we've got kindling all over, and one spark and boom.
Exactly.
And that's my main concern right now, especially with the summer.
Yes.
That's a big concern of mine too. Yeah.
Are they going to give you suggestions on what to do about the retaining walls?
No, just the forest.
Yeah, the retaining walls, we have a contractor who has, provided that, and they will be, vetting and companies who wanna bid on that. So and that same contractor did the design work for the creek. And again, they'll be vetting individual companies to come in and do the work. So they not only will be vetting them, they will be, I think, supervising them, in terms of what goes on. So those things are all hopefully covered out of the emergency assessment. That's there. I mean, I know that because I'm seeing the bills as Bill Tucker is, and what we're spending and stuff. And we are spending a lot of money on getting rid of all of the trees and stuff. They're working their way up, I think, so some of the things that are, maybe even leaning toward your house, they're gonna get rid of, but it's gonna take time, and they have to move the stuff then down to the service gate for the Corps of Engineers to come and take it away, so. But that's all being paid for out of the emergency assessment.
I was just curious.
Is the amount, do you know if the amount that's been, what is the percentage of the amount that was originally budgeted for tree removal from the property that's been used already?
Well,
As it relates to what's left to do.
The question is, what is the percentage of the budget that's been used already for tree removal? Is that the question, Jane? Yes. The assessment money.
I mean, I think, the budget that was originally set, we're not necessarily going to be using that money in those places at the same amount. There was a whole lot of money, I think, originally for bridges or something, anyway. Bill can probably, bring up what that number is.
I've got it. Tree removal from homes, the estimate was $250,000, and the expenses to date is $248,700.
And that's not the end of it.
It may not be the end of it.
Does that section include the part that we got 124,000 back from insurance, or is that?
No, that's just expenses, that's not, that doesn't take into consideration revenues. Those are just our expenses versus what our estimate was.
Yeah,
how much it was
that's
gonna cost.
something, Jane, that we're hoping to learn from Jackie when she comes to report to our committee tomorrow, is where are we with the monies that came in from state or federal agencies, and or insurance, and how is that playing into our assessment fund in terms of how it impacts the property?
Just to that point, every month, following the board meeting, there's an update to our expenses from our emergency assessment that is posted on condo control. And so tomorrow afternoon, is it tomorrow the board meeting?
Yes.
Tomorrow afternoon, the February, the expenses through February will be posted on condo control.
Okay,
It's under, resident information.
Yeah, Bill's saying on condo control under resident information, you can look at the monthly expenses every
And then
month.
down below, there's something that says Helene, recovery, and then you'll see the expense report. That's updated monthly. I pull the previous one and then add the latest one.
Thank you for letting.
Thank you, Bill, for letting the community know.
All right,
I think it's time for Barney to give his tutorial on how to submit a request. So those of you who would not want to stay for that, thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.